It's just one thing.
Got him out of the game.
A lot of damage. You know, with insurance, setting up the rental, it's like 50 years.
You're gonna use them again.
But it's, they're gonna be able to.
Oh,
Oh, boy, yes.
yay. It just, you know, you run around and you run around. You literally hit a wall. It's like, okay, stop.
Yeah, well.
All right, yeah, I'll talk to Noah about that. Mike, that's not even professional.
It's that time of the year.
Yeah, I'll talk to them about that.
Super busy.
This would have been,
They're balanced out.
yeah, I don't think it's Hancock. I think we did this.
The traffic got 50.
Oh, no, they did that. They did the little print.
That's all.
Yeah,
East Avenue.
I'll talk to him about that.
You know, because of the work they're doing, so all the way around to the Grange Road.
Did you see
back up from the Grange Road.
You gotta sign this one.
Turn left, turn to the town, some nose and out.
Oh, wait, yeah, you gotta sign this one too. Oh, my God. Okay.
Yeah, it just throws you a little curve.
Okay, we're going to get started again in just a moment.
Ready.
Okay, the hour being 6:50 PM on Monday, April 10th, 2023. I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Bridget, can we have a roll call for the committee meeting, please?
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here.
Trustee Leclerc?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
And President Garvey.
Here. Thank you. We have one item under regular business, consideration to establish a staff traffic safety committee meeting. Chief, I'll let you get right into it. I mean, your memo lays out the background and why, you know, historically what we've done and how we've dealt with it. But this is something that Chief and I have talked about, and he was bringing forward a recommendation, and I thought it would be a good idea to present it to the board with the ideas, and we could have some discussion on it. So, Chief?
Thank you. There, thank you, thanks. Good evening, President Garvey and Board of Trustees. Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the consideration to establish a staff traffic safety committee. You know, this is a matter that, especially for myself and the police department, it comes across my email, my desk on a fairly common basis, monthly basis. The concerns for traffic safety and/or resident parking related matters for the residents in town. We typically address a resident's concern by way of what we call traffic details. That is a directed focus to the area of concern. We ask for targeted enforcement from our officers. Usually increased police presence deters reckless driving behavior, and it can also lead to concerted parking enforcement to help quell the overt parking violators when we have those type of complaints. However, traffic details don't always reconcile resident concerns, particularly if the reported problems are not quelled by enforcement efforts or if the concern is recurring. You know, as an aside, I think even a few meetings ago, we had a young woman come and bring, you know, traffic complaints. And so those are the type of concerns I get that come across my desk on a fairly common basis. So the police department seeks to establish a staff traffic safety committee to ensure effective coordination of the review of these traffic and transportation issues within the community, as well as the parking-related concerns throughout the village. The responsibility for carrying out the local and transportation program would be divided among several village departments is what I'd like to propose. The coordination of the traffic and transportation-related item requests and the issues are necessary to ensure that all departments will be working toward the same goals and objectives. The staff traffic safety committee would be a multidisciplinary group of professionals representing the village's community development department, fire, public works, the police department, and then the village manager's office if necessary and or applicable. The committee would set out to accomplish the purpose and need for a sound community transportation and traffic safety program. The committee would meet to discuss and review both traffic safety-related matters and parking concerns across the village. And those requests would come in writing and for traffic safety-related matters, and then as when it relates to parking, by way of request and petition. So as I mentioned, we'd like to break this out into two types of requests. Your traffic control requests, typically that would apply to stop signs, speeding, speed limits, those type of changes. That would come in the form of request to be entered with the committee. The committee would review existing data and/or gather new data via the police department. If the request is warranted after these measures are taken, the committee will hire a traffic engineering consultant to perform a traffic engineering study to determine if a stop sign or other traffic control device or change is warranted. At that point, the consultant and the committee would then determine if the request is warranted or unwarranted. And then finally, a recommendation will be brought before you for an ordinance change to be endorsed. Secondly, residential parking requests. In those instances, what we're seeking to do is have parking requests come through by written request and a petition for the affected blocks of residents that it would be affected. When we receive that completed petition request, the village will perform a parking survey to determine if the block meets the criteria of becoming typically a resident-only parking zone. The village may also hire a traffic engineering consultant to perform traffic engineering study or to provide additional data, as well as a parking analysis to determine if the percentage of non-resident parkers meet the specifications for that area. Finally, similar to the traffic control avenue, the Traffic Safety Committee would then review the data and then make a recommendation for the board if it's to be endorsed for an ordinance change. We feel that by endorsing this administrative policy, it would establish this Traffic Safety Committee. It would be able to bring forth the concerns of our residents in the most equitable capacity so that it would be reviewed by more than just my department. And lastly, if we were to go forward with this, what I would ask is that you allow us to repeal the village code that exists for a public safety committee that has not actually been utilized in several years. So at that point, it would no longer be considered relevant once this policy is put into place.
Thank you, Chief. Questions or comments from the board?
I think this is probably a good change and formalizes the way we have been somewhat operating. You know, when we had the Public Safety Committee, we had residents being appointed to that with staff as being liaisons. I don't know how well that worked because you needed the professional staff to actually work on these things and not, you know, residents who certainly had best interests of the village in mind, but I think it was difficult for them to deal with some of these issues. So I think that kind of disappeared over the years and staff took on making these decisions and working together, and I think this formalizes that. So I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Other?
Will you have to meet on a regular basis or on an as-needed basis?
As needed.
As Trustee Ketchmark pointed out, I mean, the previous Public Safety Committee, you know, they followed kind of the charter we gave them and what they did. There was, I think, 3 public members and a representative from the police department and fire department. And I think there was, you know, some value to that. There was valuable input they could provide in terms of, you know, I think we typically look to appoint, you know, long-term residents or residents, you know, that had familiarity with, you know, the whole town or issues, because I think sometimes the residents can offer kind of a perspective of living in the town or being in the town and knowing what's going on. But I mean, I think what we found was that process wasn't working all the way through. And that may have been just, you know, the fault of us, the board, the way we set it up or the way we monitored it. But issues have come forward. Typically what happens is someone, you know, as Chief indicated, we get concerns or we get, you know, someone will say, you know, people are flying down this street or they're running this stop sign and stuff. And whether they contact me or one of you as board members, you know, we reach out to Chief and then Chief does the details that he talks about and, you know, can start enforcement. But in terms of long-term solutions, I mean, it probably would help to have a, you know, as what Chief lays out here, a comprehensive process for reviewing the traffic flow matters as well as the parking matters. The only, and, you know, I note in here that you talk about if you have the need to consult with a, you know, engineer or a traffic engineer or traffic study, that type of thing. I know in the past, there have been issues that come up, and, you know, Derek has been able to help us by, you know, certain routes. I mean, people say, you know, why can't we put a stop sign on every block on Grand Boulevard or Prairie? Well, Derek reminds us that, you know, those are state collector routes and that we took federal funding to improve them, and they're meant to be thoroughfares, and they're meant to maintain vehicles at this speed, and that, you know, those things aren't practical. I know some of that would be common knowledge, but do you think that need, you know, can be covered with a traffic engineer, or just, you know, is the makeup of the committee, do we need someone from, you know, an engineer on there? Or, I'm not trying to get Derek on another committee or involved, but those are the types of things that, again, with your experience, I think you know these things where it's not just let's put a stop sign up at every corner and which streets are meant to be, or you can just consult with Derek on the collector routes and what restrictions we have when we take federal funding in terms of stop signs and speeds, you know?
Yes, President Garvey, to your point, I think it's, this process allows for us as a staff committee to first review the data and what's before us, and Derek has been, you know, always accessible to me and to the rest of us as far as asking questions and then pursuing it to that stage, should the request warrant, you know, eliciting his services and involvement. This, frankly, just as another aside, I mean, and I appreciate what you've all shared. This is what we've learned through staff study, through some of the other communities as well. That, as you mentioned, Trustee Ketchmark, like I think this is an involvement of these processes and best practice now amongst many of the other communities that we reviewed.
And I think what's helpful is, I mean, like we've done with, like, for instance, the commuter parking around the train stations, we've kind of, when we have institutional knowledge, when we know how far those zones and why they go that far, because, you know, you don't want, you know, a hodgepodge block here or there where, you know, we have resident-only parking restrictions on this. We have the zones codified in terms of what's there and what's not there. I think that's helpful going forward. But I know the committee would always take, you know, public input in general on the topics they consider, and, you know, the board would also take public input when recommendations come forward from the committee. So, I mean, obviously, this would be a change in the process that we've had in place, although the Public Safety Committee, as currently codified, hasn't been used. I mean, this will be a change, but just thought I'd point that out to the board, see if there was any questions or comments further. Okay. Well, why don't we review this and put up the appropriate resolution or ordinance for the board meeting, give the board a chance, but I appreciate you bringing it forward, and we'll put it up at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the only item we had on the committee tonight. Once again, I will open up the meeting to public comment. Is there anyone on the right side that wants to make any comment? Anybody on the left side that wants to make any comment? Okay, hearing no public comment, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 2C5 of the Open Meetings Act regarding the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body. This includes meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired.
So moved.
Second.
The motion to go into executive session was made by Trustee Cote, second by Trustee Kaluzny. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Leclerc?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned into executive session at 7:03. We will conduct the executive session in this room.